This is Samantha Good. I'm a master's student at Queen's University of Charlotte pursuing my master's in communications. In doing so, I have found an article called Wrongful Conviction, The American Experience, written by Dr. Huff. Over the next few minutes, we're going to go through some of the historical background to why this article may have been written, some of the research that has been involved in the past few years in wrongful conviction, what we might find here in the U.S., compared to what we might find in some other countries, some of the numerical values behind the research that's been done that brought Dr. Huff to writing this article, and some other reasons that I myself came to choose to research this topic. A little bit of background on wrongful conviction as we think of it here in the U.S. today. Thinking about wrongful conviction, the experience in the U.S. actually predates the formation of the United States as an independent nation from Britain. As a British colony, many of the citizens of the colony were denied the concept of due process as we think about it today, and as such includes the right to trial by a jury of one's peers and legal representation. Accusations of crimes at this time were heavily revolved around various socioeconomic statuses, and many people, based on their status, based on their economic means, were convicted of crimes that they had no ability to defend themselves from. The scholastic study of wrongful conviction really started in 1932 by Borchardt, although most of the studies that he conducted were on individual cases themselves. In the 1990s, this scholastic study really shifted with media attention and public opinion on not only individual cases, but looking at wrongful conviction as a systematic issue. So while all of this background is well and good, we really want to talk about some of the studies and some of the numbers and data that led Dr. Huff to writing this article. So in 1992, there was a study done that was really trying to link wrongful convictions to the use of the death penalty, and that estimated that at least 23 innocent people have already been executed in the U.S. So we've talked about the what. The what is the reason that brought Dr. Ronald Huff to writing this article. But what about the how and the why? How could this happen here in the U.S.? So there are some primary factors that are thought to go into wrongful conviction. The primary one is definitely eyewitness error. So in a study done by Dr. Huff, it was assumed that 79% of wrongful convictions rely on eyewitness error. There's also the option to have police and prosecutorial misconduct. So more than 2,000 cases cited prosecutorial misconduct as the reason for reversing or reducing the conviction. So that's the judge saying that that is the reason he changed the convictions. Oftentimes there are also forced or coerced convictions, inappropriate use of informants or jailhouse snitches, and ineffective use of counsel. In choosing to write an academic article on this particular subject, there were no shortage of resources for Dr. Huff to investigate. One of those was the Innocence Protection Act of 2003. So this was a federal act that was aimed at eliminating the possibility of executing innocent persons. So it allows for individuals who are claiming innocence to have access to DNA evidence and various different things that ensure that if somebody is going to be put to death, that they are in fact guilty. In addition to this, Barry Scheck and Peter Newfield founded the Innocence Project. The Innocence Project is something that happens in law schools that provides pro bono legal assistance for inmates challenging their convictions. So what does this mean? Why is it that Dr. Ronald Huff would place so much time in investigating various different people's research and information to write an article of this magnitude? So the first piece of significance that this really has is wrongful convictions and the link to the moratorium on the death penalty. Dr. Huff himself surmises that as we continue to investigate wrongful convictions, this will lead to either a moratorium or an elimination entirely of the death penalty. He himself believes that the death penalty should be reduced with either 10, 20, 30, or life sentences in prison. And again, we're going back to the study that was conducted in 1992 that estimates that at least 23 innocent people in the U.S. have already been executed. Another significant piece of this is media attention as it's linked to DNA exoneration. So an interesting point that this article itself brings up is that for every, 10 to 20 guilty people who may be in jail, when we get one DNA exoneration, that's something that's really heavily lauded by the media, and lots of people see about it. And so what does that do to the public opinion of the efficacy of the legal system? And even further there, does that take away some of the power that the legal system has, understanding that for every one individual who is wrongfully convicted, and we find this, are there going to be 10 more people who were guilty who are now going to claim that they are innocent in prison? So as a master's student pursuing my master's in communication, one might ask what brought me to research this topic. So I am the child of attorneys, so it was kind of brought up around the dinner table with conversations of this nature. As a typical millennial, I spend a little bit too much time on Netflix pursuing videos similar to The Thin Blue Line, which is about a wrongful conviction. The Central Park Five is another currently popular documentary centering around the media craze of a wrongful conviction. Podcasts like Serial, which again is a podcast by Sarah Koenig that draws into question some of the legal proceedings surrounding a young man who is currently in jail for murder. Of course, the common cult classic as it is right now, Making a Murderer, which centers around somebody who was wrongfully convicted of rape and then put back into jail for murder. And of course, the Innocence Project, that there's typically a chapter of that at every law school and in every state. So not only these stories, but of course the individuals. Adnan Zayed, which is the individual in question in the podcast Serial, who is currently in jail, although his case is being appealed for the murder of his girlfriend at the time. Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey, who are both currently in jail for the murder of Teresa Halbach, upon which the documentary Making a Murderer is centered. Raymond Santana, Kevin Richardson, Antron McCrae, Kari Wise, and Yusef Falam, who are the subjects of the Central Park Five, all of who spent between, I believe, 12 and 20 years in prison for a murder, rape, and torture that none of them committed. So listening to these stories is really what brought me to have an interest in researching this topic. So Dr. Huff has an interesting citation style throughout his article. I think that he uses parenthetical documentation in the article very wisely, so he at the end has all of his references that you can easily find, and then parenthetically cites these as he's working through the article. It's also interesting that Dr. Huff has referenced some writings of his own, and so in the parenthetical documentation you'll see Huff, which is kind of interesting to see when you're reading through an article that is in fact written by Huff. He also has some legislation and some peer review articles that he cited, and so all of these works together are what really brought him to, they're kind of the historical background of why he wrote this article. In closing, I really wanted to point out a quote that kind of summarizes why I've brought myself to this particular research topic. "It's better that 10 guilty persons escape than one innocent suffer," by William Blackstone. I've also linked to the article itself, Wrongful Conviction, The American Experience, written by Ronald Huff, should anybody choose to look at that. I hope that you have enjoyed this, and I look forward to creating more. Thank you. Bye-bye.